Going here with our meeting, July committee meeting. Here, announcement regarding the public notice of this meeting. Notice of the time and place of these committee meetings was publicized by notifying the area news media, by updating the OPPD website, and by mailing such notice to each of the district directors on July 5th, 2017. So welcome, and we will get going right away with a finance insurance.
Can I do a safety briefing?
Oh,
real
yeah,
quick?
sorry, Tim. Thanks.
So thank you very much on that. I get emails or texts from our safety team if that didn't happen. So you're on the ninth floor of the west side of our Energy Plaza building. In the event that we need to leave this room or building, we would actually go to the elevators down to the main level and exit out on the 17th Street side. Unless there is a fire, we would not use the elevators. We would actually use the stairs all the way down to the main level out on the 17th Street side. The AED and the first aid kit are one on top of each other to the right of the elevators. Is anybody here certified in the use of an AED or in CPR? We have several in the audience as well. Thank you very much. If you have a medical condition, please write it down or tell your neighbor. Let's see. Could someone call 911 in the event that we need it? Mark, could I have you call 911? Thank you. You do have your phone with you, so very good. Thank you. Any questions to the safety briefing at all? Okay, seeing none. Thank you for that.
Let's see. All right, we'll get started with our finance director, Hurley. You want to walk us through the June financials?
We met Monday and went through this with Javier, and I think he's got some more that he's going to give us today about the audit, the insurance, and also the financial report.
Yes, good morning.
Welcome, by the way.
Yeah.
Lovely face around the table.
Thank you. Thank you. My first official meeting.
No pressure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And yes, we had a pre-committee meeting, and I'm here to report on the financial results for the month of June. This is a great month for this to be my first month to report because very quiet, easy. Pretty much everything is on track, and I'll go down, I'll go through all of the major items that we typically report on. Retail revenues were $1.7 million higher than budgeted for the month of June. Combination of factors: residential was higher, industrials were lower, but on a net basis, we are pretty much on track to the positive on revenues, for retail revenues for the organization. Off-system revenues were higher than budgeted by $7.5 million. That is an unusual. That is due to an unusual accounting that we're doing with the Prairie Breeze, where we are selling all that power. It's counting as off-system revenue, but we have to purchase that same power from the developer all the way through the month of June. Starting in July, then it becomes ours, and we will then start counting it as off-system revenues for us. So the jump that you see of $7.5 million above the budget, $7.4 million of that is really a pass-through to Prairie Breeze. And you will see that on the purchase power side in the same amount in a few slides. Other income, again, pretty much on target. This was $400,000 under budget for the month of June, but overall we're $7.2 million above budget for the year to date. O&M, the expense side of the equation for the month of June was a pretty active month. We had the fourth largest storm in our history. We've survived, and I'm pretty sure Mo is going to talk about that in a little bit. But all in all, our O&M expenses were $2 million above budget. Really a pretty modest amount considering all the work that has been done. Year to date, operating and maintenance expenses are $5.5 million under budget. And I want to make a pause here to really recognize all the work that has been going on with the cost improvement, process improvements. The organization continues to look at ways to save money and come in under budget, and we have reflected that. Again, $5.5 million under budget through the first half of the year, which I think is something worth reporting. Fuel and purchase power, this is the other side of the equation of the Prairie Breeze item that I reported. Expenses were $7.1 million above budget, but that includes a $7.4 million item that we're purchasing power from Prairie Breeze. So all in all, our expenses, fuel and purchase power expenses would have been under budget had it not been for these.
Can I ask a question,
Yes.
backing up to O&M? Have all of the expenses, the unexpected expenses that we incurred as a result of the storm, are all of those gonna be in June, or are we gonna see anything trickling into July?
We're gonna see some of them trickle into July, and actually not all of them are expense. Some of them are gonna get capitalized.
Okay.
The teams continue to work on that and figure out exactly which bucket they come
But
from.
maybe there's great opportunity for Mo to kind of talk about what we see as the financial impact, and there's been several questions about how do we work through the mutual aid arrangement? So,
Sure.
Mo, if you could share that, that'd be great.
The estimated cost right now is about $15 million. Now, a lot of that will be later this year, maybe even in 2018, because the damage we've had, the damage we've had is really not typical. We've had a lot of transmission damage, and typically that's not the case. With the transmission damage, it takes a while to restore that. So you're gonna see a lot of additional costs that's coming at the end of the year. About a third of that estimate is distribution, and most of that is kind of, you're seeing that right now. But even on the distribution side, we will have to come back and put some permanent fixes. Usually, most of it, 90% is fixed for good, but some areas are very challenging. So we get the customers back, and then we go back and reconstitute the system. So we're gonna see a lot of costs, I guess what I'm saying.
Okay.
From the transmission perspective and a little bit on the distribution. And right now, it's about $15 million. Now, what I would add, and maybe Javier could add to that too, that this obviously will be declared, disaster, and I think we're gonna get some compensation from FEMA, but it's too early to know exactly what. We basically have to complete the work, track all the costs, and submit that. So there's a lot of moving parts.
Is there a timeline, a deadline by which we have to do
Submit
this
that?
and submit? Yeah.
I'm not sure about that, but I think we're very confident that no matter what the time, we're gonna get our work done here really quickly, because we're talking about a couple of major transmission lines. One, we have a fix to that, but it's not permanent. The other one, we're talking about 7.1 miles of transmission line that's down. We wanna get that fixed really quickly, to make sure that, the security and reliability of the system is intact. So regardless of the time, we have our own time to move really quickly and get that back. So from my perspective, I don't think there's a concern about the time.
To report and get reimbursed.
Yeah, I think there's a time where FEMA, once the president approves the emergency declaration, then there's a time that they will come back to us and say, here's a time frame. We need you to expend the expenses that you believe are reimbursable. And typically, it's 75% of what those
What they agreed
undepreciated.
to. Yeah.
Exactly.
I
So
think
then
Tim
we'll
is
work with
exactly
them on
right.
that.
So that's why it's really important that we track everything, and we have all the right documentations, and everything is in order. They have to agree that this was appropriate, and we've always been able to show that what we've done is right on. So to answer your question, I don't think we're concerned about that. I think that's gonna work out just fine.
Well, maybe talk about how the mutual aid works. I think that would be good, just to refresh how we work with the other utilities and the folks that came in to assist us.
Sure, and if I may, just maybe take a few minutes and talk about the storm in general, if that's okay. I don't know if that's the right time, I apologize, but the mutual aid,
I'll go quick
obviously-
on the rest of it. So.
Obviously, we are.
Hey, we're gonna have to
mutual
do it
aid in
anyway
the
later,
Midwest.
so we're just getting it out of the way.
And what we do, and that includes utilities like MPPD, LES, Mid-American, Loop Power District, Southern Power District. I think what we did this time, and we typically do it, but this time we were very aggressive in doing that. We went out right away and started asking for help, because it was very obvious it was a very severe storm, the fourth largest event that we've had. So it was really incredible that we got all the help we needed as soon as we could. But I do want to recognize, and maybe that's where Tim is going with this, that in the first 24 hours of the event, 70% of our customers were back, which is a tremendous achievement by the men and women of OPPD. And this is the tricky part, that when you ask for help through the mutual aid, it takes a while to get everybody and to help you out. So it's really crucial that we have the men and women of OPPD, the crews, to respond very quickly and get the customers back as soon as we can. But the mutual aid, we have an incredibly strong culture. We help one another. We go the extra mile, and we've seen that from the companies that I mentioned. Additionally, we have a lot of external contractors such as PAR and Sparks and many others that maybe I shouldn't. I'm going to forget one of them. So we also asked for help, and we had over 400 personnel out in the field, additional 400 within OPPD, behind the scenes, including warehouse, customer service, finance, HR, everybody. It was a really great team effort by the company. And, our crews worked 15, 16-hour days for 6-7 days. Some were very tired, but it's that sense of service. It's the core values that we talk about all the time, that we have passion to serve, and we want to honor the community and care about one another. We had a very safe restoration process. So I have a lot of numbers, and I don't want to go into that, but it was a very tough event, very challenging. I think there were a couple tornadoes that were confirmed. We had winds over 100 miles an hour, which typically does not really impact our transmission system, but because of this severe storm that we had like 4 or 5 69 kV transmission lines that were impacted. We had a couple of 345 kV, and that's really important to the region, not just OPPD. So we had people working really hard and stepping up and making every effort to restore the system to its original configuration. We still have a lot of work to do. As I said, we have that 7.1 miles of 345 kV that we're working through it, how we want to get that done very quickly. I'll answer questions.
Yeah, the only thing I would say on the mutual aid is what happens is the utilities that supported us and the contractors will essentially send us a bill based on their contract, their required personnel pay and whatever that agreement is that they have with their employees, and then we'll audit that, obviously, and then we'll essentially pay them for that service back, and then we'll submit that with our internal cost to FEMA based on the total cost. And again, as Mo said, we think it's probably in that $15 million range just for an OPPD and the work that we did here in eastern Nebraska.
And that could change a little bit. I mean, by the time we were done, we had replaced like over 400 poles, 30 miles of distribution lines, 4 or 5 miles of transmission lines. We still have the 345 kV, so tremendous damage. And again, I do want to thank all the utilities that I mentioned: MPPD, LAS, Mid-American, Loop, and Southern Power districts. We had one additional electrical contractor that we use this time, Sparks, so we're evaluating that and making sure that we learn from this storm and get better for the next time, so we get our customers back even earlier. But we're very pleased the way the OPPD men and women responded, and I couldn't have been more proud of the work they did. It's really not about it's about a service. It's about the values that Tim talks about all the time, and they show it when we.
I would just, what you don't hear behind the scenes is that Mo and his wife were out of town for a little getaway and stress relief, and then came back in the next day. So he came in Saturday morning early, leaving Friday, storm hit, called, said, as soon as we'll be back in on Saturday morning. Ryan Mayberry, who's our traditional store manager, was also out of town on a bike ride with some friends in Iowa, ended up coming back in on Saturday, and so Aaron Smith and Cheryl Limbach, essentially led the storm, initial team. Amy Gertis was calling people on Friday night, other utilities, and so that's kind of the commitment that you see, and
Always happens on the weekend.
so, pardon me?
It always happens on the weekend.
Someone on the weekend, so.
You know, one other thing that's not mentioned here is the other behind the scenes between customer service and those people answering the calls and our communication. I thought our communication as far as, the internet, me going online, I could keep track of everything that was going on, and everybody else could too. So I think customer service did a great job, and so.
Absolutely.
And it was well
You
coordinated,
did a
so.
great job. And yeah, where did you find housing for these people since it was during the College World Series? You also have to have housing, and you have to feed these people. That had to be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, there might have been somebody from LSU that didn't get their room that night.
They'll come back either way.
And some probably shared rooms.
How does it work with mutual aid when obviously a storm of this magnitude went beyond our service boundaries and our neighbors, Mid-American and NPPD probably were in the same position we're in? Were they still able to provide us with resources?
Yeah, so they did later on in the arrangement. So LES had completed their work by Sunday, and their crews came, I think, later on Sunday. NPPD sent their transmission crews. They didn't have a lot of transmission damage in that neck of the woods. It kind of went through us, a little bit of Plattsmouth, but north of that area. And so we had the transmission damage. So they sent their transmission crews to help support us, as well as then the contractors were coming in. From Colorado, from Arkansas. PAR came in from, it's on my picture in the president's report. But then, Loop and Southern really didn't have any damage, and they began to send crews right away. And so I had the opportunity, and I'll probably repeat this afternoon a little bit, had the opportunity later that week to be at the APPA conference, and Director Yoder was there too, and gave a thanks to the folks from Nebraska, from the public power side at APPA. Some of them were in attendance, including their board members, for their support. So they got some national recognition, I told them. So I don't think they appreciate it as much as I did, but really that's the kind of relationship that we have with public power and with just the utilities in general. And so
This is something I don't believe our big storm in '97. I don't think we had this type of mutual aid support, did we?
we did, but it was later in the arrangement in '97. We had in 2008 when we had a terrible straight line winds that kind of came across from west to east. We did call in quite a few crews. Matter of fact, we had loop crews again, some crews from South Dakota that came in. We had a variety of crews that came in to support us. And if you remember, when Katrina occurred, we sent about 12 or 15 crews, 20 or 30 people, to New Orleans, Mississippi, to assist with that. And when Sandy occurred, we sent most of our splicers to the East Coast to work in Long Island to essentially do all the work in the subway on the cable splicing. So that's the kind of relationship that the utility industry has.
So the financial fallout we'll see for several months then, right?
Yeah, we will. But again, what we'll do is we'll identify the recoverable piece of that. We will not receive the payment from FEMA probably for a year. Sometimes it goes a year and a half until they work through their process. But we'll obviously record what we believe that benefit's going to be on our books.
One thing on that, Tim, I know this isn't the first storm ever to hit, but it was a big one. But I've always thought when I've seen our recoveries on insurance and all that, that's a great team effort. We do a very good job of tracking all these things and getting them reported. And then I suppose that's just one of those things every quarter or something, report back to us where we're at. The finance committee, you'll keep track of all this anyway. So.
Sure. Yeah, we'll come back.
But anyway, you do a great job on that too. Just
Thank you.
Track, because that's a lot, just all the things you mentioned, the track. So I've always been impressed with doing that. So are we going back to finance? Javier, you want to finish it?
Okay. Just to wrap up on expenses, other expenses are pretty much on track with the year. For the month of June, we had $1 million over budget. But again, it's pretty much on track. For the year to date, we are $3.4 million over budget. the majority of these was the valuation of the nuclear fuel stock that we had at the beginning of the year that really was just a calibration from budget to actuals, and that's what explains most of the expense. Let me see here. For net income, so revenues and expenses all combined for the month of June, we are $1.1 million under budget. Again, tracking pretty close to budget. If I may add my editorial comment here, I am surprised. I'm actually pleasantly surprised to see how well we track with budget and the practices. Such a large organization and have such a small variance, it's remarkable. Good fiscal discipline. Over the year to date, we're $21.1 million over budget on a net income basis. That's a really good story, especially as we're building cash reserves from the past 2 years. It really puts us on a good, solid ground for rebuilding that rate stabilization fund fast and keep our financial picture solid. Going on to the capital expenditure report. For the month of June, capital expenditures were $10 million, which is just $500,000 over budget. Year-to-date capital expenditures are $42.8 million, which is $28.7 million under budget. Another great story, capital expenditures vary depending on seasons and depending on availability of personnel. Can we execute all the capital expenditures? However, doing a little bit of due diligence myself, I'm confident to say that a big portion of these under budget result is a direct result of all the work that the team has been doing on scoping right the capital projects. We have achieved. It's not that we're doing less capital projects. It's that we're doing them for less money. We're actually scoping them right. We're sourcing them right. We have a really big effort going on with supply chain management, and we're achieving savings for our customer owners, and you can see that part of these capital expenditure results. And last but not least, on cash balance, this is following on the same narrative on the net income basis. Our cash reserves continue to show positive results. Cash balance at the end of June was $341.3 million, which is $29.9 million over budget. This excludes the restricted funds for the NC2 participants. So this is truly just OPPD cash reserves, which again, it's a great story that continues to build on our financial strength. We should be able to meet the expectations for the rate stabilization fund if everything continues like this through the end of the year. So I'm not claiming victory yet, but I think we're on a good track. And that's all I have for the financial reports.
I got a question for you on that wind in June, 7.5 million. What was the capacity? Do you know? Is it above, below, whatever?
The seven.
You said because the wind was running.
So the Prairie Breeze. I don't know what the capacity was. What I reported was just on the contract with Prairie Breeze and the power that we sold through off-system sales.
So all renewable
But I don't know, maybe it
for
was-
June was 22%.
John might know that.
Yeah, 22% for the month of June.
I know it's not as much because it's not usually as windy, but
Correct.
that's when we need it. But anyway, just like the other day, I was just thinking, Tim and I were meeting, it's like, good day, it's hot and windy. I mean, that's probably a good thing for us, right? But, so I just kind of wondered what those capacities are through the summer months.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. So, we have that little screen on the 8th floor where you can kind of come in and see where the capacity is. And so, 7:30 today, wind was 7% of all of our generating sales today. But if you go back to last Thursday, it was 2%, right? So that hot, humid, typically you'll see that drop off of that wind. And that impact, that's just a seasonal piece, and then obviously in the shoulder months and the winter months, you'll see it pick back up.
So, and I can't reveal a lot of the information, trading information, but what I can tell you is that we've been selling a lot more than we budgeted in megawatt hours. The prices that we're getting on off-system sales are significantly lower. So, all in all, we're still seeing off-system sales track with budget, but in a perfect world, if prices had held steady, we would see significantly higher off-system sales. So they're both forces are competing with each other and pretty much resulting in a net neutral.
It's challenging, I mean, all these factors, but thank you. Anything else? No, we good? Nope. All right. Move on to, any other questions? All right, move on to nuclear oversight. Director McGuire.
I'm sorry that I wasn't at the meeting on Tuesday, but Mary, if you could give a report, that'd be great.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Director McGuire. I have a few things to report on decommissioning. We continue to maintain spent fuel cooling, which is imperative, and so I just want to make sure that we recognize that. We also have commenced our site fuel characterization project. As of this morning, we are 80% complete with the visual inspection of 528 fuel bundles. After visual inspection, we will move forward with the sipping campaign that we have to do on the remaining bundles. So that is all going very well. We have also completed removal of all of the major interferences in Room 81, and it's allowing us to do an additional asbestos removal in that area. And it continues to remain on track. We did conduct a training oversight committee meeting. It was the first for this decommissioning plant. We transitioned from our traditional training program over to a new training program. And the purpose of the oversight committee was to provide a cross-functional review and challenge of the training program moving forward, and to really plan for the upcoming year in the training and maintaining the qualifications that we need. On a licensing perspective, we did submit a license amendment request to relative to our cybersecurity plan, and just to make it more commensurate with the decommissioning plant. We expect approval from the NRC, or we requested approval from the NRC in April of next year. Also consistent with the decommissioning status, we did receive approval from the NRC to modify our license in regards to the mitigation strategy for design basis external events, or FLEX. And so we are current on that, and we will not have to implement any more of the FLEX program. So we did receive approval of that.
Can you explain to everybody what the FLEX program is? I think
FLEX program was what was put into place for the nuclear community within the United States after the tsunami hit in Fukushima. And so this was the response, and there were a number of tiers and programs that were required. One was to build a building that could withstand a number of different environmental issues, and to place equipment in there to be able to respond to emergencies similar to what would have happened, or what happened with the tsunami. Also, the NRC has placed and put into different areas within the United States additional equipment, should that be necessary, that they can bring out to the nuclear facilities that would undergo some sort of environmental damage as a result of something that would occur that was beyond the design basis of the nuclear power plant. So, and they typically call that FLEX. So we are compliant with FLEX, and we do not have to continue with the implementation of that. That was the approval that we received from the commission. We also received our certified fuel handler training and retraining program. What that allows us to do, it's the first step in the reductions in our operations staff. We do need three other approvals from the commission in order to proceed with that. All of those are anticipated to come in sometime in the month of July. So we will start implementing that, and we expect to see some changes later this fall. Last thing that I would like to report is we had two NRC regional inspectors. I think I reported in May that our site resident inspector had retired, and that they were not going to replace him. So this is what we can expect in a decommissioning plant going forward, is on a quarterly basis to have Region 4 inspectors come out and review what we're doing in the decommissioning. The second quarter inspection resulted in no findings, and the commission inspectors were happy with what they saw in terms of the decommissioning. Last but not least, on a people side, we currently have a head count of 416. That is up slightly, which I think raises some eyebrows when I report that, but we have had a number of attrition, people leaving it out of our security workforce, and we're trying to replace them, so that's why you see that going up a bit. Number of resignations through the decommissioning from June of 2016, 109, retirements 36, terminations 46, and transfers out of Fort Calhoun 47. And that completes my report.
What's the total on that?
I'm sorry?
The total on the employees?
416 as of last Thursday.
Hey, Mary, I have a quick question. There was an article in the paper about cybersecurity with nuclear plants, and they discovered a breach at Wolf Creek in Kansas. Cooper was not impacted, and I was just wondering, OPPD, since it's offline, is that a worry or a concern? I know it's always a concern, and then we get into areas of just keeping what we have or the efforts we make to be secret.
We do. Cybersecurity is obviously of paramount importance both to the nuclear facility and OPPD in general. We maintain our security workforce for physical security, and we do maintain a number of mitigation strategies for cyber as well.
Thank you.
Following up on that, when you said that there was, just out of curiosity, the license amendment or request about change in cybersecurity plans, is that the NRC that reviews that, or are other agencies in the loop on the review of those?
It is the NRC, and it's a
Just
request just for the NRC.
And we are, as far as the budget?
We currently remain under budget, and our financial forecast remains the same, that we will come in under budget at the end of the year.
Good news.
That it?
Yes, it is.
All right, move on
We
to,
have a short
Oh,
nuclear
I'm
oversight.
sorry.
oh, sorry, John.
It's all right.
That nuclear oversight.
It's going so
It's a
well.
good
Well,
thing he's here.
Not too much this month to report. Nuclear Oversight did complete a radiation protection audit on June 23rd. We did not identify any items adverse to effectiveness of the quality assurance program or the ability to implement that program. We did also complete a third quarter, we look ahead to the third quarter and what inspections the NRC might do. And we do a what's called a management directed assessment. And we did not identify any conditions adverse to performance. In other words, the plan is meeting all the requirements per the regulations at this point in time. And overall, site safety is satisfactory at this time, really an uptick in safety performance. That concludes my report.
Thank you, John. That concludes our report, if there's no questions.
Any questions? Nope. We'll move on to public information, Director Kavanaugh.
Okay, we have one action item. The committee did meet on July 11th. The gist of our discussions that day is the same as what we'll receive this morning, and that is the annual report on the environmental stewardship monitoring. We will receive a presentation today from John. Can you give it to Julie? John will be giving it. It's basically the annual review of SD7, the environmental stewardship monitoring report, and to determine that whether or not we are in compliance with the board direction, and then later today we will then vote to approve or not. It looks good. Anyway, John, you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Director Kavanaugh. I'm going to present the monitoring report for SD7, environmental stewardship. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please stop me and we can try to provide answers at that point in time or provide additional information. SD7 is environmental stewardship. I think we got it here. And just reading through the SD, the board is committed to operate OPPD in an environmentally sensitive manner. Therefore, the board establishes that a long-term goal of at least 30% of retail energy sales shall be supplied by renewable energy resources.
OPPD shall conduct its business in a manner that meets all environmental regulatory standards and enhances natural resources conservation and stewardship. OPPD shall participate and provide leadership in the development of national, state, and regional environmental policies and initiatives that support OPPD's mission. And OPPD shall promote efficient use of energy as a company and by its customer owners. OPPD shall, at the pace of value or in response to actual or anticipated environmental regulatory requirements, incorporate renewable generation into its generation portfolio. And finally, OPPD shall proactively engage its customer owners and other stakeholders in meeting this directive. So we'll break these down into the separate parts. The first one, again, the board establishes that a long-term goal of at least 30% of retail energy is supplied by renewable energy resources. And so we've broken it down here into by years. Actual 2016 was 19.6% of retail sales. 2017, we project that will be at around 34% of retail sales. And then for 2020, considering the IRP that was published earlier this year, we project that we'll be at 51% of retail sales at that point in time. And so the IRP, part of that is 160 megawatts recommended in 2018 and 266 in 2020. What's interesting to note is, and is noted there, is that in 2015 the goal was 10% renewables by 2020, which I think was established back in 2010 or so. And we're significantly beyond that now. So a lot of good work has gone into that and getting us to where we're at today. This graph indicates where the wind farms are located for the purchase power agreements, and the facilities are shown on the right-hand side, mostly in the eastern half of the state. And in the number below there, the 900 megawatts total, also includes the landfill gas at Elk Station, and also the WAPA, Western Area Power Administration hydro, that we are contracted with WAPA on an annual basis. So we receive 82 megawatts from WAPA in the summertime and around 41 in the winter months. Okay, moving on to the next item, that OPPD shall conduct its business in a manner that meets all environmental regulatory standards and enhances natural resource conservation and stewardship. And as you read through these, no violations of environmental permits that resulted in enforcement action or fines. There's published updates to the avian protection plan, and the plan is posted on the OPPD.com. And so this has been a developing item that the group has done in protecting birds for transmission lines primarily. And there are some bird diverters that are located on, say, river crossings as we build those lines or reconstruct at this point in time. And Lisa's been highly involved. We'll show a slide later with the zoo where that's been a highlighted item. So I know she's excited about that. So we did put an additional SO2 ambient air monitor up at North Omaha Station. There was one sited at Whitmore Street, but to get more accurate data, we put one in conjunction with the county up at North Omaha Station in the Power Park ball fields there. And then finally, Russ Baker's group worked closely with the Corps, I believe, and the USGS group to put in a river monitoring, level monitoring gauge near Blair on Highway 30 there. And so that helps us track river levels more accurately. Still in item 2, with conducting our business in a manner that meets regulatory standards. This shows the emissions reductions over the time frame from 2015 to 2016. Significant reductions in various constituents there. And I'll tell you that I would say the majority of that is from the closure of North Omaha 1 through 3, at least on coal. And then also the installation of dry sorbent injection and activated carbon injection at North Omaha 4 and 5, and also at Nebraska City Unit 1, in conjunction with the mercury air toxic standards.
So, quick question, John.
Yes.
So, I appreciate the comment that it's related to moving away from the use of coal, that many of these emissions, and it's good to have that prevention action. When we talk about the other emission reductions that are captured, where do they go once we capture them?
Well, some of it will go in the ash.
Okay.
And we'll talk about that later, in that it's rendered a lot of our ash sales that we have to landfill that. We can't sell it or recycle it anymore. But I would say that's where the majority of that goes.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions, comments?
There'll be an item in system management too that we'll talk about.
That's correct, yeah.
Ash fields
Yep.
as well.
Speaking a little bit more about ash, this
Did we
is
skip fleet?
this is a depiction of the fly ash that is generated at the different stations, or at least that which we recycle. So at North Omaha Station, approximately 39,000 tons are recycled of fly ash. Bottom ash is about 14,000 tons. At Nebraska City Unit 1, you can see there are 14,000 tons of fly ash reused, and a little over 1,400 tons of bottom ash. The fly ash typically is used for beneficial fill. There is some use in cement production. The bottom ash is primarily used for road use in agriculture areas.
Can we go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
I must have been so intent on my question, I didn't catch where the fleet-wide reductions took place.
I would say those are primarily in the areas that I mentioned. So the 10% decrease in CO2 is primarily from North Omaha Station, the units 1 through 3. Is that where you're getting at?
The fleet? Oh, I thought it was on-the-ground transportation. No. Oh, so we're talking generation.
Generation.
Yeah,
Got it.
generation
Okay,
fleet.
thank you.
That's correct.
Although that is interesting, because our focus has been around biodiesel, related works, including electric vehicles as well.
Sure.
But that's a good opportunity for us to think about putting some of the changes that we've made in that as well, so.
You know what's interesting in this is just a one-year reduction. If you would go back to 1995 and see the reductions from that, they're significant. You know, that would be another slide sometimes to show. But as far as just this year, that's helpful. But there's significant reductions since 1995, 2000. You can see a continual decrease in emissions.
That's correct, in that there's been regulations, NOx
regulations coming in.
particular. I will say, though, that we did add Nebraska City Unit 2 in that time frame. So
Right.
you would see a
So you
tick
have
up
some
from
up.
something like that. Okay, these are other areas that we look for opportunities to recycle, and you can read through their various areas: recycled batteries, scrap metal, used oil, wooden poles, paper, conservation of electricity. I'll also mention that at the operational power plants or units, we do measure efficiency in terms of heat rate, and that's one of our areas that we monitor, and we have specific metrics that we watch there too. And we did realize a significant increase in efficiency with Nebraska City Unit 2 with the installation of the new turbine rotor.
John, I think also in our cost and process improvement, kind of tied to this, is that we've really spent time in the power plants looking at auxiliary load as well. So load and pumps and energy that we can turn off that aren't needed in the production and the generation of the units. And so that improves the efficiency of the unit, lowers cost in the unit. And so I think the team's done an exceptional job on that over the year.
Thanks, Tim.
So on this slide,
Yes.
I appreciate that you're recycling paper, but I know there's an initiative to move to electronic billing. Are we capturing the measures of paper that we don't?
That's a great segue. Thank
Oh,
you.
sorry. Thank you.
This is still under the same theme, but we are encouraging customers to use paperless. And our goal is to get to 50% paperless by the end of 2018. We did have an automatic enroll pilot this year that went well. We had 98% of the pilot customers continue on with paperless billing, and we anticipate that we'll be over 30% paperless by the end of 2017.
So it'd be, I think you would have a better chart on the previous page if you said, this is the amount of paper we don't use. Even more valuable for an environmental effort than recycling.
That's a good point. We'll
Yeah,
take
yeah,
that
good
under
point.
consideration.
That's a good point.
Thank you. There is a note here also about the Arboretum, which is really a gem in our portfolio, I would say, out by 108th and Londo, I believe. If you haven't visited there, it's a great place where we planted a lot of good trees and done some good work there. So. These are various groups. This is item 3. OPPD shall participate and provide leadership in the development of national, state, and regional environmental policies and initiatives that support our mission. And you can read through the various groups that we are involved in that have a focus on environmental issues. And
John, that's a list of the organizations that we're leading, involved in, and so on and so forth. Do you have a couple examples of sort of the outcomes or the policies or initiatives that have been outcomes of some of those partnerships?
yeah, well, I'll talk about Tim Yeager, who's with us, is involved in the Nebraska Wind Conference. Is that correct? Which we do sponsor that or provide some leadership and oversight in that group. And I think that's an annual conference that's set up here in Nebraska. That's one example. I'll ask the group if there's any others.
Hey, John, just on that, it's at Wind and Solar Conference now, but we do it as well every year, and it's pretty well attended each other year. But anyway, we always have a lot of the good speakers there. I know Tim goes every single time to
I've been every time.
give a press. We're very, Ann's been there several times, Tom's been there. It's very favorable OPPD, let's put it that way, as compared to our others. So Tim does a good job, but they always ask us to speak and say what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know, so that's pretty cool.
It's a good
That's the only
conference.
one I really.
Yeah, I've heard it's great.
Yeah, we should go next time.
I would say Russ Baker and Patrick Finnegan, they're seated in the rear, are also involved on several fronts, I would say. I don't know if you want to mention some, Russ, or...
He's got to go all the way around. He's getting his exercise in.
Thank you, the military guy. That's a Navy guy.
So we have a number of people on my staff, and myself included, that are involved. The Nebraska Industrial Council on the Environment, Emily Muth, is in a leadership position in that group, and that's a cross-industry group that works very closely with the state of Nebraska on issues, concerns, regulatory changes that need to be made. Patrick Finnegan is on the water program side of that, so is Bob Holmes. We're also on some initiatives with specifically the state of Nebraska, the Nebraska Department of Environmental Quality on air program enhancements or regulatory changes that need to be made. And Bob Holmes is leading and involved in a group that's also looking at startup shutdown and malfunction issues with the state of Nebraska, and trying to form up an approach to that meets the regulatory requirements, but maybe a little more flexible than what we've been used to in the past. A number, Utility Solid Waste Activities Group, Seth Boyles is involved in that, I'm involved in that, Mark Hansen and my staff is involved in that. City of Omaha is a great success story. Patrick Finnegan's been doing a wonderful job, along with some of our building services people, Jim Fitzsimmons, on working with City of Omaha to try to look at some water retention, stormwater management type initiatives that they could deploy across the footprint of the city in that too. So kind of a wide variety that kind of span the whole spectrum on that.
You know, one thing that's not in here is a lot of the nonprofits that OPPD helps out with. I know they've helped out with Jesu Housing quite a bit, Rebuild Omaha. At the neighborhood conference, they pointed out OPPD and how they've helped out. OPPD's always
That'd be a great addition, Ann. We'll add that.
Yeah, there's a lot of nonprofits in there that OPPD reaches out and helps with all the sustainable information.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So just to build on what you said there a little bit, Russ, when I moved to Nebraska in '92, I think I had the chance, maybe it wasn't until '93, to first attend the NICE meeting. Dick Varner was the president when I first attended. You've been president, and I do appreciate that Emily is in a leadership position now. I think OPPD has helped that organization become a go-to organization by DEQ when they are looking for stakeholder input on regulations. So I value that, and I think you've really done a nice job. The other thing, I just don't know. Is OPPD planning to put comments in on the LB 1101 effort where this NDEQ is evaluating the solid waste regulations? Is that part of? Is that on your radar? I mean,
is that something associated with kind of the coal ash and incorporating some of the coal combustion residuals rules?
It's larger than that. There was a NDEQ was directed by the unicameral to come up with a stakeholder input process. There's an advisory committee that I happen to be on that is receiving a report that's being generated now. So I would certainly hope that OPPD makes comments to potential restructuring of solid waste management.
And I appreciate that, Director Yoder. We have weighed in on some of that. I suspect maybe because it's a legislative initiative with the
Initially,
LB, that Seth Boyles would probably be involved.
Very good.
Be happy to weigh in on doing that, but I know we provided comments to the state of Nebraska that encourage them to incorporate the coal combustion residuals rule, and I sent that directly to the director, Jim Macy, for their consideration.
Right.
So
a little separate but connected.
Yep, absolutely.
Very
absolutely.
good. And then just to drill down a little farther, not necessarily for you, but everybody, on Director Moody's question, I appreciate the question about outcomes. And so because today's agenda has us looking at the integrated solid waste management as well, or the resource planning, have we created some kind of value? Obviously, these activities take time, they take resources, they take money. So is there any calculus on what kind of return on investment there is on this? I know it's not easy.
Right.
It's not easy.
I would say no to that. I don't think we've calculated any value propositions. Some of them are, I would say, just the nature of, it's really important for us to be involved. I think in the comment you said about NICE, about helping organizations, one, in many cases, just increase their formalization, increase their planning, increase their perspective, but I would say no, we have not done any value proposition calculating on those.
Right, and I understand the difficulty and the more resources that would be required to do that. That would be resources. But we can all agree that there is value here for these types of activities that we cannot calculate, that we believe fit our values, that believe are important to OPPD's mission.
Sure, I would agree to that.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the organizations that we're not involved in may be the ones that we've decided we really don't see the value or the benefit in, and these are the ones that we've identified as that are valuable for us to stay engaged with, either for networking reasons, for regulatory reasons, for just us sharing our perspective on whatever may come out of those future regulations or policy whatever those discussions may be, so.
Yeah, and having a seat at the table to make the discussion rather than waiting until it comes out and reacting to it.
It's hard to put, it's hard to put a financial.
But paragraph
number
three,
on that.
paragraph 3 of this initiative, OPPD shall participate and provide leadership in the development of national, state, and regional environmental policies, initiatives that support our mission. So this intangible benefit, there's a tangible, can you measure it, and an intangible. This is leadership all around the state that I think our customers want to see, and that you can keep your ear to the ground of what's going on that could affect us. But that's one benefit. Do you think, because there's a lot of staff time, people out there doing this, do you think they're getting, it's probably good they keep their ear to the ground of what's going on and the changes? Do you think you get feedback from these, being members of these things?
Almost definitely. You talk about the intangibles. I'd say the credibility, the reputation, the trustworthiness of OPPD staff, and it's not just environmental, it's on the engineering side, on the business side, is second to none. So we get inquiries that come to us asking our opinion on things that I'm not, or that we haven't even, really communicated up here too, just, because they check with us to see what our thoughts are on that as well. And then when we have ideas, to your point, Director Gabe, we bring them up and push them forward and say this could be something, an opportunity for improvement. They take them and they run with them across the whole spectrum of these organizations.
I'll give you just a great example of when you're involved in these organizations, you get, and I just remember when I used to chair the Environmental Council for the Nebraska State Chamber, you begin to hear through NICE, the Nebraska Industrial Council on the Environment, you begin to hear concerns or issues from some of the organizations on permitting, on process, on timing. And there's been several times where we have had businesses in our service territory that have not been able to expand, right? Which would be able to use product and grow revenue and grow jobs and a number of different things for the community that because we were in part involved in that organization and because of our relationship with the state administration, and this example is Governor Johans at the time, making those comments about what I'm hearing about expansion of this company. Governor Johans at the time engaged very clearly with the DEQ about what's slowing down this environmental permitting process, and how can we, do that. And within 30 or 60 days, that permit process began to move pretty quickly. Those jobs were able to be created, that expansion could occur. And so that's the ear to the ground and the work that we do, whether Russ or the team bring it back to our economic development group or our policy group or Tom or Seth from the national side. I mean, that's the interface that I think is really important, and to me, that would be one tangible over probably the last 15 years, but my guess is there's hundreds of those that occur in the outcome of some of these.
May I add to that also? We do an analysis on an annual basis of these organizations and so forth. And then also at senior management, we go through on APPA and LPPC of saying which committees should we be on, which ones should we put the resources and so forth. So we went through that just a few months ago.
Yeah.
So.
And the one thing you don't want are notable absences too, right? Like, because people, if OPPD is not at the table, then people
That's
are
a
going to
message.
draw really negative conclusions that you're not interested in, especially as a public power entity. Like, I view this as a big part of our role to be out in the community and really kind
Exactly.
of.
It certainly seems to us, Mr. Ann and I have been here the longest, that we're involved in many more of these community organizations.
Oh, yeah, the community organizations that we're involved in,
previously.
many times these nonprofits will just call, and say, can we have help? And you're always available to help them.
But we will add that. That's a
Yeah.
nice add.
You're talking like meetings, OTOP or something.
No, I'm talking about organizations that need help and
Earth Day?
assistance in trying to figure out sustainable ways as far as their building, especially Habitat for Humanity, Jesu Housing, all that
As a
kind of stuff.
resource, you mean?
As a resource.
Oh, okay.
You're right.
I see, yeah.
They'll call
As
and
a
ask
resource.
for
They'll
going
call.
in for an energy efficiency.
They'll do energy efficiency updates and that kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
I know Scott is, and prior to Scott, Dino Busalis did a variety of strategic planning for a variety of
Yeah,
not-for-profit
yeah, Dino's
organizations.
done
Just
strategic
because they come to
planning.
us and say, hey, could you help us with that? And we have the expertise and the talent
Yeah.
to be able to do that, so.
Another question related to this, but maybe a little bit moving us on. When I parse this out a little bit, I read development of national, state, and regional environmental policies. So are we differentiating between what we've been discussing and the work that Tom and our lobbyists are doing to help guide and direct? Do we need to consider those things separately, or in some ways is the work that he's doing part of us being involved in developing state, regional, federal policy?
I would say it's included in this as well.
Okay.
So the work that Seth does, working with APP and LPPC on inputs relative to clean power plan or co-residual kind of activity and try to getting the industry perspective around that. So we're actively involved in that typically through those associations.
Yeah.
But Seth is, in that example, on the federal side, is very active in that.
Okay.
Trying to look after the interest of our customer owners on policies or regulations that may significantly impact us in a negative way, understanding there's a value and need for us to be responsive on the environmental side.
Okay.
So a quick follow-up on that. I see the APPA is supporting, what is it, HR 806. What's Seth doing on that?
806 is what?
The energy efficiency.
No, ozone.
I can't answer that off the top of my head, but we'll get you a response back to that.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Russ.
Okay, the next item in the, in the directive reads that OPPD shall promote efficient use of energy as a company and by its customer owners. And so this slide talks a little bit about the 300 megawatts of cumulative demand reduction by 2023 and the mix of demand response and energy efficiency programs that align with the IRP, Integrated Resource Plan. And so through the year 2016, OPPD and its customers have realized 124.9 megawatts of demand savings. And here we show the Cool Smart impact of a typical day. This I think we've had 2 so far this year. And so the green line you see there would be the projected use or load of our customers. And when we enacted the Cool Smart program, we shaved off the peak essentially. And,
Joe, what would it be roughly on an extreme day? Maybe 3% savings, would you say?
it'd be, I don't know percent-wise off the top of my head, Director Kavanaugh, but in the range of, I'd say 58 to 48 megawatts, depending on the weather and the usage at that point.
Okay.
So, did you have more on this slide?
No, just details, if there's any questions about the Cool Smart program.
No, not about the Cool Smart, but it's the mix of demand response and energy efficiency. Is it fair to say that it's mostly demand response?
The next slide might help. Put
Okay,
that.
fair enough. We got something going on.
You are such a straight man today.
Do you know what the next slide?
Yeah.
So this is part of the demand side management portfolio status, and again, our goal is 300 megawatts by 2023. 2015 was our base year, first full year of DSM after our commitment to the 300 megawatt goal. And you see the different categories. So the first one, Cool Smart, provided 58 megawatts of demand reduction in 2016. Our goal is to install additional devices on people's air conditioning units to get us closer to 85 megawatts by the end of this year, correct? With the program projected to provide 137 megawatts of the 300 megawatt goal by 2023.
And I think some of the initiatives we're looking at around this one specifically is, kind of bring your own thermostat to work, so to speak, right? So how do we use your own thermostat to drive some of these demand reductions during peak season? I don't
Right,
know.
you'll be hearing, we're working on that program, so you should be hearing about that in the next month or two.
Wonderful.
What we're gonna be able to offer customers on that. And I'll just add that those plan numbers represent what the demand DSM potential study recommended or said that we could target for by those years.
So you're on target.
But,
Well, on the Cool Smart is one that we've kind of hit a plateau. We're changing on our marketing and we're looking at doing the bring your own thermostat and trying to get that back up. But it has fallen short the last couple of years. So the first few years we were able to get lots of customers signed up for it, but now it's been kind of like.
But to answer Director Yoder's original, it is really focused on demand reduction there are some elements, obviously, on some of these other programs that we've talked about, whether it's HVAC Smart or the Smart Steps program, some of the prescriptive stuff, our Eco 24/7 work is really focused on demand reduction, even though it does have some energy efficiency components to it, or energy reduction components to it.
Well, I guess, so why is that, I guess is the question. I see on 2016, it's about a 4-to-1 mix, right? Demand side savings versus energy efficiency, more or less. And so we have a cumulative savings, and energy efficiency picks up there cumulatively by 2023. So is it because of the note at the bottom that says uneconomic relative to other sources of capacity, and on the previous page, producing verifiable savings? Is that why we're?
The focus of the 300 megawatts was really about reducing the need for additional power plants, and that was a factor of the demand component, our peak load. So that's why the focus was on demand side management.
Okay, fair enough. I guess since this is tied to the integrated resource plan, I haven't seen the integration necessarily. Certainly I've seen the integration as we look at different sources of electrical generation, power generation. But I haven't necessarily seen the integration of energy efficiency into as a load management tool.
It's in the load
You probably say,
forecast.
yes, it's in the load side of the equation, which you don't see it explained on the resource side. But it could be, we could probably do that and present it in a different way.
Well, or we can wait until IRP later. Whatever's easy.
Okay, I guess I'm up. I'll make a quick comment. So I agree with Javier that it would be incorporated on the load forecast. Essentially, by process, what happens is when we optimize in the planning process, it'll select kind of the optimized solution to solve. And so that's kind of where the two integrate from a DSM&E perspective, specifically the DSM side, as well as the traditional supply side resources. We let the software optimize based on the cost profiles of various programs and things like that. So that's kind of where they come together, and we can talk more about that during the ST9 if you'd like.
Yes, we may.
Okay.
But when we talk about costs, this is, to throw one other thing in the IRP, it talks about evaluating demand side management choices according to one cost test called RIM test. And so I'm wondering if that's where some of this energy efficiency is failing as well. It's because of the cost test we've chosen to include in our model.
So when we did the last plan, the energy efficiency programs within the 300 megawatts were not challenged. So the component that got challenged, kind of that footnote at the bottom, the 46 megawatt, that's the demand side management. So there really wasn't, by process, the IRP did not suggest changes to the energy efficiency component of the program. If that helps a little bit distinguish between the two.
Maybe I'm a little confused here. Where I want to go is more energy efficiency. Clearly.
Yeah, I think
so. What's keeping that from
Has he seen
happening?
the report? Do we have the report? Didn't we hire a study to get this done? How we choose
Yeah,
what we're going to do?
I think this is
the EAG report in 2014 or whatever it is,
which we're going to update in 2018. So I think the rationale around this is relatively clear from our perspective, is that the focus was on demand reduction, defer future generation. The focus wasn't on energy efficiency, one, because we're seeing it naturally occur, right? So any load growth that we're seeing in our service territory is being offset by natural energy efficiency today. That's why you see our forecast to be relatively flat for the next 5 years. Even though we're adding 4,000 homes, commercial developments, industrial developments, even if you add a Facebook-like customer over the next 5 years, we see like a 0.4% increase in load. So what's occurring, and what has occurred in the past and what we were forecasting, is that natural energy efficiency, right, is occurring already in our service territory. And so for us to incent that, we didn't think that was the right component for us to do, because it erodes really the rate projections in the future. And I know we have an opportunity to meet on Monday, and I'm showing the directors just one of those examples that we're kind of looking through through our integrated energy management initiative that really shows that actually natural energy efficiency is occurring at a faster rate than load growth. Right?
And that's true for everybody in the country.
Sure.
What is unique to Nebraska is that we are in the top 10 in every category of energy use per capita, whether it's residential, whether it's commercial, whether it's industrial. Overall, we're in the top 10 energy user per capita.
If that's what Nebraskans want to do, then whatever.
Nebraskans
That's demand side
don't want to have
management.
energy efficient
No, they
houses.
do, but on demand side management, shouldn't it be, just take the other side of this?
Sure.
Shouldn't it be, as a public utility, we give them the choices and opportunities, which I think you agree with. Doesn't mean everyone's gonna want to do it or sign up for it. I mean, that's why you're hitting us on this Cool Smart deal. The early people wanted to do it, and that's their thing. I'm signed up for it. I do other things. But I think that getting the next ones on board is our challenge, right? But not every single person is gonna say, boy, I really gotta sign up for that program. Our rates are lower too around the country, so there's a lot less incentive to do that, because how much money do you save? I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just saying you gotta weigh in both sides of this. I think the challenge is probably how do we go and keep reaching, dig a little, it's gonna get harder as we've signed up, just like anything, like growth in the business.
Sure.
You
Well,
can't always get
one last
20%
comment.
growth.
Then one last comment. My challenge is we are willing to, previous slide, spend a lot of money and a lot of resources to show up to meetings that have no direct measurable impact, which is what we're talking, produce verifiable savings, but we aren't willing to do it for energy efficiency. And so I'm just wondering why that's.
I disagree with that, because, for example, of us going to all of the community and teaching how to do energy efficiency and how to be sustainable. A lot of those people go out and that's what they're preaching and that's what they're helping with. All of these nonprofits that are building houses, all of them have had help on how to build an energy efficiency house. We can't figure out exactly how much we've saved as far as demand and with that, but we have done that. And we've spent a lot of time with that you can't really measure, that we're already doing.
No load growth is.
No load growth is the proof of it. But, as far as energy efficiency, again, you can put, the amount of help that we have helped with within the community and how, to build these energy efficient houses, how to be sustainable, the amount of people going out there doing that.
Yeah.
I think there's a tension that we have to continue wrestling with here, quite honestly. Like, I think there's no question that the more proactively we're involved in helping our customers be more energy efficient, the more downward pressure it's going to create on revenues, which is going to find its way into our rates at some point, right? Unless we can continue the cost cutting that we're doing, which I'm not sure that that's sustainable either. But I think we got to continue to wrestle with this. I went and dug up the city of Omaha did a comprehensive energy management plan back in 2011-ish, and one of the things that they did is they hired a company to do the project who subbed out a survey of 500 Omaha residents. So this is dated, it's 2011, I'll admit that, but I'd suggest that some of the numbers in here have gone more towards renewables and energy efficiency. But one of the things that they found is that there's, and sort of connecting this to our renewable energy discussions as well, that the vast majority of the people that they talked with, meaning 95% or higher, are willing to pay more for more renewables and for energy efficiency, meaning pay more in rates. I don't know what we're finding in some of our market research, but that to me is compelling, we can't ignore the fact that our customers have an interest in this. So again, I don't know that I'm suggesting a course or a path, but I think this is something we need to wrestle with, because there is an interest out there in additional energy efficiency, and and fortunately the renewable side, we're seeing it, the pace of value is catching up, right? So that we're on a good path there. But I think the energy efficiency side is something that we need to continue to wrestle with that and think about what role we should play in helping our customers.
Didn't settle on what we're looking at, because we had another study done, which we should look at. Once you hit a certain amount on the rate, it goes to, I don't want to do any of this stuff.
Sure.
Remember that rate study? And it's like, if we increase the rates 10%, and it just falls off the edge of the cliff.
Yeah.
We need to make sure we're all talking about the same studies, though.
Yeah.
Because it is important, and when we don't build these new generations, which we probably won't need to, obviously, you're saving big bucks,
Yeah.
500 million or more, and when we just shut down, so I agree, it's something to look at. I'm just being devil's advocate.
And I think
What's
Mrs. Olson can
realistic?
probably speak to that. She's our guru on this.
Right.
Well, and you're right. In fact, when we were doing the resource generation, the tipping point really was at about 3%. People were willing to say, I'll pay up to 3%, but after that.
Help me understand, because they actually have dollar amounts in here. 3% of the average bill is roughly.
It was $100 at the time.
3% would be about $3.
Right.
A month?
A month.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
But that's something that we can revisit, right, in terms of, that's.
Next resource plan, yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey, folks, we have to keep moving. We have several more slides here. As far as any changes to this policy, that's something that we can certainly address at our workshop.
Thanks, I agree. We get more slides, but it's a good discussion. But some of those studies that we have, how old is ours? 2 or 3 years old?
14.
2014, so not too.
13, 14.
But,
through there.
we should see those and say, hey, where's that?
Triangulate all that.
Because it was a big study to say of all these things, what works, what doesn't. And I think that's how we did this Cool Smart deal.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, great discussion. I'm going to move on from this slide. I think there are areas of energy efficiency covered. There's curtailable, interruptible power rates for our industrial and commercial customers, HVAC, and energy efficiency partner custom rebates for C&I customers as well. The next item, OPPD shall, at the pace of value or in response to actual or anticipated environmental regulatory requirements, incorporate renewable generation into its generation portfolio. And so a couple areas we've covered there. The IRP plan did consider solar and additional wind resources. I think you saw the outcome of that earlier this year. The community solar stakeholder outreach and evaluation is underway and well under progress at this point. And then finally, the integrated energy marketplace strategic initiative is in progress, and that's considering many areas. 3 of them are noted here: distributed energy resources, or DER, battery storage, and electric vehicles. OPPD shall proactively engage its customer owners and other stakeholders in meeting this directive. And this points out the areas that we do use the stakeholder process and engage our customers during the reporting period, and also use various social media tools to engage our customers. The transmission line siting efforts include environmental impact assessments, as reflected in the bolded items on the next slide. And so there are several areas there that we go through when we do the transmission stakeholder process that we consider as we site new transmission lines. A recent example of the OPPD safeguarding wildlife and endangered species, and I mentioned earlier, is the bird diverters that were installed on the transmission lines running along 13th Street on the western border of the Henry Doorly Zoo. The zoo did recently open the Holland Meadowlark Amphitheater, where the raptors are flying overhead. and the bird diverters were installed so that the birds will have a visual indicator to avoid the power line. And the zoo does a good job of acknowledging our efforts at the beginning of each show. I did mention that the parrot looks like it's cut and pasted in there, but that's the real deal.
It flew right over my head, so.
Let's see, where's Lisa?
The recommendation is from the Public Information Committee that they've reviewed and accepted the monitoring report for SD7 and recommends that the board find OPPD to be sufficiently in compliance with board policy SD7. And with that, I'll take any other questions or comments.
I have a question for the board, but before that, I just want to say it's, what, 6 months now? This is a great team to work with, and I recognize that when I present things, I present it sometimes forcefully, but I have a great deal of respect for everybody here. I've recently lost a colleague in another part of the country, too young, and didn't get a chance to say something. So, you guys are good, and I'm thankful to be here, and it's good. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Now, I'm going to switch a little bit. I don't know, board members, how did we set an environmental policy that doesn't address the fact that OPPD is the largest emitter of pollutants in the county? I mean, it's the biggest risk, it's the biggest hazard, it's measurable. How do we not say something about that?
What would you, I mean,
A goal to be number 2?
we're the only one. I mean, we're the only provider as compared to what?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's, to what? I mean,
To-
what are we comparing that to?
To
We can't
polluters.
rewrite history.
You'd have to
We're-
import some.
No.
We can
I
only
mean, right
change the
now,
future.
today, our operations are the biggest emissions in the county.
Obviously, because we have coal plants, which are baseload plants, which at this time, there is not the technology to do it, to have a reliable electricity for our people. And as far as, we have to look again at the entire SDs as far as maintaining a balance. We're slowly decreasing our amount of carbon, and we're doing a lot better job than a lot of other people in the region.
Much better.
The fact of the matter is, though, that people need electricity. The economy needs electricity. Everybody needs electricity. How are we going to work this? You know, we also have to worry, okay, we're going to shut down all of our plants. Okay, what's that going to do as far as our finances, as far as stranded assets? What's it going to do as far as our credit rating? You've got to look at everything you have to look at the entire thing, and you've got to balance everything out.
So, go ahead.
Okay, just real quick. And like I say, I mean, you can change the future, not the past so much.
It's there.
You know, what's happened. But when I look at page 7 of this, so those decreases and emission reductions don't mean anything to you? Because that meant to the ratepayers a lot of money for mitigation strategies, and many board members prior to you or me or others, these things happen and would change the course. And that's what we're trying to do, change the course. But on a positive, and I'm not just always, you know, gotta be positive. Look at those. Those are major emission reductions. Is it enough for maybe to satisfy you? Probably not, it looks like. But I think we should be proud of what we've done and where we're going. That's what we can control. I appreciate your input, but this is a guidelines of how we keep improving. It's not the end all. There's not one of these SDs that's the end all be all. If we did that, we're good for on everything. It's a constant tough battle. Anyway, you get what I'm saying.
The perspective, yeah, I do, and I want to say something about that perspective. Collins, in his book Good to Great for Businesses, which probably a lot of people have read here, gave an example of a railroad company that kept comparing its income from freight year over year, and it was better year over year. What they didn't do is compare it to the market, and they were losing big. So when you say we're doing better than we have been, but how are we doing compared to the market? is my challenge for our board.
That's a good challenge, but you just returned from the APPA conference, I understand. I've attended one of those and other things around the country over the last 4 or 5 years I've been on the board. And to me, I was very proud of what was going on at OPPD. I mean, we're one of the nation's leaders as size on renewables. We're doing so many good things that, you know, people just don't read about. We made, I think, one of the biggest decisions ever, and it is what it is. But that was a bold decision on what we did for ratepayers. We looked at facts, we made a decision. It wasn't an easy one. But all these different things we're doing, I think we're standout, everything I've seen. And that's why I like going to those things. You see what everyone else is doing, so we're not in this little cocoon. But we're a national leader in a lot of these things. Did you not see that down there, or were you? I mean, we can always improve, but
Yeah.
I guess you get.
I found great value in going, and would be happy to share some of the reports and observations that I was privy to and that I formed. I came back with the same lens. We need to look at what's happening in the marketplace. Yes, we're doing better. Absolutely, we're doing better. And it's important to recognize where we are, and that I think maybe we don't say it in the environmental directive with a goal, but I think we're headed in that direction. We're closing down all of our coal in North O. And I was just talking about the county. I wasn't talking about all of our district, just because that's where our biggest population center is. That's why it's the biggest risk here and the biggest hazard, because of the population. So I think it's worthwhile to mention it there. It can't always be, we're doing great, it's unicorns and rainbows. And I think that's some people's strategies, is to always point to the great and the good. I think we have to recognize the challenges that we have, and that we have a great team that's here that's coming up with solutions and meeting those challenges.
Okay, I want to move on.
Yep.
I want to move on. I want to make a last statement though, real quick, because I can. New board member, fairly new board member, experienced board member, fairly new board member, fairly new board member, new board member, good experience. If you look at a board makeup, this has changed dramatically since I've been on 4 years, whatever it's been. We're much more transparent. These questions and these discussions are excellent, which I love it. Good discussions. This is a very complex business, is what I found out. And there's a lot of changes going on here, like this perfect time in the energy markets. So no one out there really knows exactly what's perfect. There is no perfect. It's changing environment. What I'm saying, I've seen so much difference of the questions, and it's not just unicorns and rainbows, as you say. We've asked tough discussions, questions, and things. I think we challenge the senior management, new leadership. There's been a ton of changes. So that's all I'd say, and I'll shut up, is patience. These are 6-year terms we serve in. These are long, ongoing. You just can't do a 180 and change what we've been doing. You can't do that. Anyway, with that, we need to kind of move on.
It's a report.
Okay. Well, thank you. System management, Director Hurley, you want to?
Oh, yeah. John's going to give us a report on some landfills, more other things.
Thank you, Director Hurley. I'm quickly trying to get to the right page here. Okay, I've got 3 items dealing with landfill issues at Nebraska, 2 at Nebraska City, 1 at North Omaha Station. The first one is for Nebraska City Unit 1, Ash Landfill Phase 2 side slope closure. And what this deals with is, as I said, the closure of Phase 2 of the NC1 Ash Landfill. And Christy, can you on the picture here in the lower where you see the double lines, NC1 Phase 2 side slope closure, that is the Nebraska City Unit 1 ash landfill that's been in use since 1979, since Nebraska City Unit 1 went commercial. It's permitted in 3 vertical phases, and we have closed Phase 1, which is the lowest phase. Due to
We have not quite reached final capacity on Phase 2, but due to some new stormwater regulations, to remain in compliance, we need to close out Phase 2 of the landfill and then divert our attention to Phase 3. So we'll still use Phase 3. Phase 2 will be covered with about 2 feet of soil and vegetation at that point. And so we advertised for this work. 3 bids were received, reviewed, and evaluated. We worked with HDR to review and evaluate the bids and determined that Vite and Company out of Rogers, Minnesota was the best overall evaluated proposal. And we have awarded that to Vite in the amount of $1,778,828. And so that work is commencing as we speak. Any questions?
Sure, it's the $7 million, when we send the bill to the customers, is that on the fixed or is that on the variable?
The $7 million.
The cost here.
The cost.
You mean, is it expense or capital?
No, so it would, so on the customer charge is what you're saying? So the customer charge wouldn't include this. This would be in the non-customer charge. Customer charge primarily included delivery and customer-related charges and activity, meter reading, billing, those kinds of pieces. Well, we kind of went to the delivery side component. Didn't include transmission, didn't include the generating and the associated costs associated with generating. Yeah, sure. Okay.
Any other? Yeah, that's, so Director, you're ahead of me.
Yeah, I was
again.
ahead of you, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank
Thanks
you,
for
Rich.
the segue.
Appreciate it.
This was the first part of Nebraska City 1, again, the Phase 2 side slope closure. Any other questions on that before I move forward? Nope. Okay. So the next item is Nebraska City 2, the ash landfill expansion, cells 2 and 3. And so that would be the upper part of the drawing or the photograph here. The red portion is cell 1 of Nebraska City 2. So that was put into use in 2009 when we commissioned Unit 2. It was full in full capacity in 2014. And so we closed it and we covered it with soil and vegetation in 2015. And so we have about 1.5 to 2 years left. All the waste from NC1 and NC2 is going into the NC1 landfill at this point in time. When that is full, Phase 3 is full, that's when we'll shift over to units 2 or cell 2 and 3. And so that's what precipitated this contract. The site construction did commence in 2015. We did reach an impasse with the contractor at that point in time and terminated that contract for convenience. We rebid the work, and 2 bids were received from Vite and Ryan. And OPPD and HDR again reviewed and evaluated the bids and determined that Ryan Inc. Central out of Janesville, Wisconsin submitted the best overall evaluated proposal. And so we awarded that in the amount of $7,386,600. And we estimate that work will be complete in November of this year. A couple other points to make is cell 2 and 3 will be good for about 6 to 8 years total. And Director Moody, you asked about a plan that for future waste disposal, and there is a plan. It was in progress up until we had the issue last fall, and then we put that aside since we had to deal with getting the construction going. We will pick that up again in the spring. But we have about 100 other acres that we have slated for ash disposal. We just need to figure out exactly what the timing and sequence of that will be.
Right, thank you.
You bet. Any others?
I think it's worth mentioning how long you expect these to last, the capacity for these, and then just a little bit more about what happens after they're closed, the monitoring that occurs. Just
Yeah, so 6 to 8 years for cells 2 and 3 is what we anticipate, and the waste from primarily NC2 will go in there, since we still are able to market NC1's ash, but some of NC1's will go in there as well. I'm going to defer to Russ. Could you ask the second part of your question, Director Yoder, again?
Yeah, the question that I have, and pace of
As far as monitoring?
is, what is,
I think you should sort of just move over there.
what are the long-term actions that occur with a closed landfill?
Right, great question, Director Yoder. So as an owner and operator of an ash landfill, one of the things that you also do that we haven't talked about is you surround the landfill with groundwater monitoring wells that we monitor at all of our landfill sites. And so when you move to closure, as we did on the Nebraska City Unit 2 Cell 1, you will encapsulate the mound of ash with soil, 3 foot of soil, and then you'll grow vegetation on top of that to minimize any erosion that you would have on that. And then you will continue to do groundwater monitoring for 30 years into the future to ensure that the constituents that are in the ash are staying on site and are not posing any particular problems to public drinking water or making it out into the environment and harming public health, wildlife, or safety of others.
Great.
So close it with soil, continue monitoring for 30 years is, I think, the short answer.
Thank you.
Thanks, Russ.
Yep.
Any other questions on Nebraska City?
That's right.
Okay, Christie, if you can advance the slide. The next item is similar to the first one I discussed on Nebraska City. This is North Omaha Station, Ash Landfill Phase 1 and 2 side slope closure. And so if you look at the photograph here, the two parallel lines that kind of form a horseshoe in the upper left is the Phase 2 side slope closure. And the coal pile runoff pond, we will have the contractor do some work there. And so, as noted with the yellow line, part of the work also complements the stormwater runoff improvements that keep us in compliance with our permit. And so we've reached the permitted elevations with landfilling ash at North Omaha Station. That's what precipitated this contract. And so 2 bids were received, reviewed, and evaluated. OPPD and SCS engineers, who we've used typically at North Omaha Station to aid us with this evaluation, reviewed and evaluated the bids and determined again that Veit and Company out of Rogers, Minnesota, provided the best overall evaluated proposal. And that was awarded in the amount of $1,179,357. And that work will also be completed before the end of the year at North Omaha Station.
So is this the last landfill that we'll need up there?
Yes, that's correct. Any other questions on that? Okay. Turn it back over to you, Director Hurley. Thank you.
Okay. Then we're going to move on to the SB7. Oh, 500. We got to do 500 first.
So the first item is Kate Brown.
So this contract for $904,125.50 is in regards to replacement of our devices such as desktops and laptops in the district. This is a part 1 of a 2-year replacement process that we're doing for the district. And we awarded it to Gov Connection, and this is just that replacement of those devices. Questions? It's pretty straightforward.
And Mary?
The other item that's on here is $611,000, $216.16. And that is our annual FEMA invoice for the emergency response plan at Fort Calhoun. As we downgrade that emergency response plan, we will no longer need these services, but FEMA invoices on an annual basis. We'll have to pay this, and then at the time when that is reduced, we'll be able to apply for a reduction in the invoice.
No, it's not reduced already. It will be reduced when the Zerk fire comes down, or exactly what's the timing of that? If you can explain that.
We've had the request in to reduce the emergency response plan. We've asked the NRC to approve that by the end of this year, but we would not be able to implement until after Zerk fire, which is April 7th of 2018. And so we would require FEMA services should there be an emergency until that time. And as I said, after that, we would apply to FEMA for a rebate on this invoice.
Thank you.
Okay, now I guess that's the, now we'll move on to our ST9 planning. Brad Underwood will talk to us about this.
Thank you, Director Hurley. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
So today I'm pleased to spend some time providing the group with an update on our Strategic Directive 9, which revolves around resource planning. So you can see from the first slide here that the primary charge of the initiative is to ensure that there's adequate resources and analytical capability to assess our supply and demand side portfolio on an ongoing basis. When we do that, we want to ensure that we're reliable, competitive, cost-effective, and environmentally sensitive in accordance with the directive. And we're going to do a couple things to attain that goal. The first thing we're going to do is periodically assess our mix of generation assets, demand-side management, purchase power agreements, and renewable energy resources. In addition to that, when we evaluate the portfolio, we're going to look at multiple scenarios. So when we do this type of long-range planning, as you might imagine, there's a great degree of uncertainty with what the future world could look like. And so in order to adequately account for that, we want to make sure that we look at a number of different scenarios and portfolio iterations. And then finally, as we go through the process, we want to ensure that we are closely supporting and aligning as many of the other strategic directives that we can as we go through. So up on the slide today, you can see the organization has developed a somewhat rigorous process to go through and look at our portfolio. Primary to this, I'll talk about the process in a little bit of detail, but I'd like to point out this first purple box on the far left, moving from left to right. This stakeholder outreach on the front of the process came as a result of the feedback that we got during the last IRP, where there was pretty clear voicing of preferences that they be more involved in a more structured manage on the front end of the process, they being customer owners. So we were glad to receive that feedback, and we adjusted our process going forward. I think as a quick check, we're doing that now with community solar. I think we brought in people kind of on the front end, and when we do this effort in the future, it would look very, very similar to that. So kind of walking through the process, once we gather the inputs on the far left, both supply and demand side, as I mentioned, system load is a significant input to the process, fuel and purchase power, and then we want to input unit parameters. How high can the unit go? How low can the unit go to be used in the simulation? And then any sort of environmental regulations that we need to be sensitive to as we plan. Moving from left to right, when you go to portfolio optimization, that's kind of what I referenced earlier to one of Director Yoder's questions. We operate with the intention that we want to achieve the lowest cost portfolio while satisfying the other demands and expectations within the other strategic directives. Once we do that, we go into dispatch modeling, and this is probably the unique component of the process where we do two dispatch models. Actually, we do a number of dispatch models, but there's two primary steps. The first one is a deterministic dispatch, and that's when we take the most probable scenario that we think we're going to end up with. So here's what we think gas prices are going to do delivered to the stations. Here's what we think coal costs are going to be. Here's what we think load's going to be. Here's what we think these other things are going to be. And we say this is the world we think we're going to live in. and then we run that through, and we would call that the deterministic solution. After that point, then we would move to a stochastic analysis. And I'll talk about that later, but a stochastic really allows us to intentionally inject volatility into some of those inputs and to see what the portfolio would cost to operate in the future. Maybe just a quick note on labor intensiveness. So people have asked, is this difficult, is this hard, what does this take? And so we made an approximate estimation of the amount of person hours that we put into the last process, or the last IRP. So there was about 4,300 person hours. So if you think, well, what is 4,300? That's a weird number. That's about 2 years, 2.25 years. So the resources come from a number of different people in a number of different functional areas, but that's kind of the overall magnitude. And then there were tens of thousands of hours of computer simulation time. So this is the algorithm piece of this. This is the sort of the stochastic modeling. Quite a bit number of modeling hours. So as you can see, when we're assessing the portfolio, we've made many meaningful changes, I think. So the first thing that we've done is we've really increased the amount of renewables. So I just wanted to put a quick summary on here. Looking from 2010 to the projected 2020, this would be a tenfold increase in renewables. So we're busy changing the portfolio as our environments and our strategic directives dictate. As we execute these changes, we're committed to a 5-year general rate freeze, so we also keep that in mind as well. And as we go through the portfolio simulations, we want to pay special attention to the amount of energy that's produced by the portfolio, when that energy is produced. That's kind of a seasonal component. And then we also want to make sure that we maintain adequate system reserve margins. And that's an expectation of the Southwest Power Pool, our regional transmission organization. So here's a quick look. If I put a couple of visuals on here, they're not necessarily for consumption, but it's just to help me articulate a point on what does the volatility look like. So each of these lines is a separate portfolio. So you can see system load. The low end was 9.5 million, the high end was 12 million, and this is the volatility that we're trying to inject so that we make sure we don't get surprised in the future by the total cost of the portfolio. So recently we completed an integrated resource planning process. Hopefully that was very visible to our customer owners, and obviously you're well aware of that as well. WAPA did accept that IRP with no constructive feedback. That was our expectation, but we just wanted to report out that was our experience when we filed that. In addition, we talk about material changes in the environment, and what exactly is a material change? Can we clarify that? And so we tried to do that up here. So the first one would be significant load changes. So if we had somebody come in or we had somebody leave, and it really moved that load needle, we might determine it's appropriate to go back and take a look at how that would simulate. Meaningful changes to SPP accreditation policy. This is really a unit-specific issue. So if the accreditation policy changes for fossil units, if it changes for renewables, and we decide that's a meaningful amount that could affect us, we might go back in and take another look at it. System reserve margin changes. So kind of right before the IRP, SPP, the Southwest Power Pool, made a change. They said you need to maintain 13.5% reserve capacity above your expected peak, and then they kind of notched that down to 12. There's also more talk about changing that from 12, maybe knocking it down another basis point or two, maybe going to 10, something like that. If we're capacity flat right now, so that change won't affect us a whole lot. But if they said, hey, you only have to retain 5%, or you only have to retain 3%, that kind of shift, we would talk long and hard about going back and doing this again. Any alterations to current environmental regulations that are already on the books that we already have visibility to, we would be sensitive to that, as well as any proposed new environmental regulations. So here's a little bit more context. One of the charge in the directives is that you will look at multiple scenarios, and that's why we look at the stochastic. So again, not necessarily for your consumption, but on the right you can see some fuel graphs, you can see some resultant power prices, and then on the left you can see the technology schedule that we were using for what we think certain technologies will do. We also discussed in some detail that the renewable assumptions that we put into the portfolio for solar generation and wind generation, those came right off the street in responses to an RFP. So we try and do the best we can to get the most updated information when we run it. There was 800 iterations that were run, and so if you're kind of trying to think through what does 800 mean, it would have been the 4 colored portfolios. So we colored them, blue, pink, green, I think, and yellow, and then we ran each one of those 200 times. So that's the computing sort of side of this. That's the volume of scenarios that we're trying to utilize. So finally, these are the strategic directives that we think touch resource planning, and I'll kind of talk briefly about each of those. So competitive rates. This idea of getting 20% below regional average in a specific amount of time, that's the optimization piece of the resource plan. We want it to be low cost. And reliability, this is core to our mission. We want to make sure that the system operates predictably and reliable in a way that when our customer owners want energy, all they do is flip a switch and it's there. And we've worked hard to accustom them to that expectation. We want to maintain that. Customer satisfaction with SD5. This is one we added sort of incremental to the integrated resource planning process. We talked about the others were relevant, but 5 we added. And there was an awareness in the group that, if our portfolio composition is moving away from customer preferences, that could be a problem for us. We would see that reflected in maybe decreased J.D. Power scores. Maybe someone would say we're not fulfilling the core mission of public power if we're not doing what our customer owners want. So we wanted to include that one as well. SD7, John talked a lot about that this morning. So the idea of maintaining environmental standards, we're in compliance with laws and regulations, and there's a number of other components to that SD that John discussed. Resource planning, clearly the charge to do it. So we'll do this on a consistent basis. We'll have a specific methodology. We'll execute that methodology consistently as the environment or our filing requirements dictate. Economic development is paying close attention to, we want to keep rates low. We want businesses to locate in here. We want our communities to grow. And so we want to be we want to work very hard to simulate as much of that environment as we can, as well as existing businesses. Can they grow? Can they expand? We want to facilitate that as much as we possibly can. Stakeholder outreach, and we want to make sure that process accounts for acquiring customer preferences in meaningful ways. And I think you saw that on the front end of the process, and you saw that on the back end of the process in that process slide that we had earlier. So we want to be out in front of people. We want to give them access to subject matter experts here at the district, and you saw that in the open houses. And then finally, the enterprise risk management piece of this. Within that ERM policy, there's specific dollar values of things that we can and can't do, and we want to respect that policy. We wouldn't want to pursue a portfolio that might violate the standards of what kind of dollar risks the organization is allowed to take that's documented in that process. So that was a lot. So pending your questions, we would recommend that the board find OPPD in sufficient compliance. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Greg, you had questions when we ended the other day. Do you want to follow up for him?
Yeah, just a couple things. First, huge kudos on adding that stakeholder engagement earlier in the process. That's something I definitely heard as well. So I think that is a really, really smart move, and I'm happy to see that in there. This is just kind of a curiosity question in defining. We use the term competitive.
Yep.
And I'm just kind of curious what we're thinking, where that came from, because the other 3 adjectives we use are all right in the mission, but competitive is something that I haven't seen before used.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't, obviously, the board kind of came up with the directive. My understanding of competitive is that it's sort of that economic development sort of feel to it, where people look at us as a place that has low cost rates and they're able to locate here, their businesses, and grow and expand. Is there a specific metric or some percentage that says that this is what competitive is? I would probably answer the 20% below in respect of SD2, but that would be mine.
Is there also an element of...
So I might interject, having written the policy a couple of years ago, at that time, the determination to put competitive in there was really to understand that we're competitive within the marketplace in SPP.
Okay.
And it's really important for us to understand how our units are competitive within that environment.
Okay.
So that was why competitive was in there.
You say our units, you mean?
Our generation units.
Because as we, obviously, as we bid into the market, right?
Yeah.
If our units aren't being utilized in the market because they're not economic, that's not good, right? That's fixed costs, so you're not getting any value for it.
Yep, okay. That's what I anticipated, I just kind of wanted to make sure I understood. And then, you offered a list, where did I, of the things that we would look to. I'm on 13 of 17, so significant load changes, meaningful change. Yeah, thank you. I don't see generation prices in there, so the price of coal. I know we saw a major rise in our prices of transportation at one point, maybe back in 08 or 09. I mean, I would assume that that's part of the et cetera in here?
Yeah, absolutely. The list, it's hard to make an exhaustive list, but yeah, we certainly be very sensitive to that. Any sort of huge change in fuel prices, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I think the point here is that it has to be something significant. It takes a lot of resources to run these in a good way, and want to make sure that we're respecting the use of our ratepayers or customer owners' money. Say, hey, we will run this for sure, but we'll wait until the conditions warrant.
And to what, help me understand, and I apologize, maybe I'm a bad board member, but I'm not intimately familiar with the details of the IRP in the way that I should be. But are there elements within the IRP that sort of start to hint at or articulate triggers or changes that we might anticipate in the marketplace that would cause us to make, if X changes, then decision Y becomes sort of inevitable? If that makes sense?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We don't explicitly put that in our resource plan. I think we have other initiatives going on that are outlining the roadmap for what that might look like. I think maybe customer experience is one. Integrated energy marketplace is certainly one where we would obviously attain and publish that kind of content.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Brad, help me. So when we look at solar in the IRP over a 20-year period of time, if I'm not mistaken, we had some, and I know we did it in contract prices, but in future years, we looked at some of the, and I know we're doing it in IEM side, the Integrated Energy Market initiative we're doing, but we also look at some of the technological benefits that we may be seeing, battery storage, solar, and some of those, and other kinds of generation, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that question. So, what I might point to is the technology schedule. And so, when you look at forward-looking projections, obviously the price of solar is changing, the price of wind is changing. There's these other technologies that are changing, and that would be listed in our technology summary. And some might consider that a roadmap where we can look at that and go, okay, at this point here, looks like the portfolio would select that as a result of optimization.
Okay. Remind me again when we'll do this again?
The Integrated Resource Plan is a WAPA requirement. It's every 5 years, outside of some of these other events that might occur. The one thing I might offer is that if these events occur, it might be a portfolio review.
Okay.
It might not be the full-blown, pending other feedback, it might not be the full-blown kind of process.
And an example I would give is that as we had in the original plan in units 4 and 5 at North Omaha, kind of in that 2023 period of time. So essentially closing down units 1, 2, and 3 on gas, moving 4 and 5 to gas, or some other alternative to that where we still need the capacity. That's where we may do a resource portfolio run to say what are the alternatives purchase, build, buy, convert to gas, whatever those options may look like. That would be that shorter kind of version of, we need the capacity accreditation, what's the best way for us to get that, rather than a full-blown integrated resource plan in that regard. So
The other thing, though, is when we did the nuclear power plant review.
that would be
That's the
a
best
great example.
of
Yeah.
the past year and a half, 2 years. There was a material change, and we had a change, and we had to review.
And then I think by process too, if there was some sort of proposed generation change, like, we would be bringing that back for discussion.
What if there was a view that, despite the energy efficiency improvements in the marketplace, that we wanted to tackle that and adopt that and retire some plants? How would that show up here, or would that show up here, or do we make the decision first, or does it come up as an option?
So if I think through the process, if we were to have, a different direction on energy efficiency or whatever that looks like.
Or some load reduction.
We have right now 300 megawatts embedded in the load forecast, right?
Yeah.
So,
But what if we were to scale it up?
Right.
So by process, let's say we did scale it up. Theoretically, that would take your load down, and that would decrease your need for generation assets.
But that's not a scenario that's in here.
So I guess
Not specifically.
what I might interject here is that there's a definite difference between resource planning, which we do annually, and an IRP. An IRP is a formal document. It's something that's required by contract. Resource planning and generation, we continually look at the changes that are going on in the marketplace, all of the things that Brad has listed here. We continually look at that, and so major changes, as he's indicating, significant changes, obviously trigger us to go look at the resource planning piece of this, but not to do a full-blown IRP. So there is a difference between those two processes, not in terms of the process that he laid out, but in terms of internally, how much of that resource do we really look at putting into that analysis. So we'll do kind of what I would say a general, here's what we think might happen, and that would give us some indication as to whether or not we needed to do more analysis going forward.
But I think the timing of it, just to get to Director Yoder's point, is that if there was a directive to move to 700 megawatts of demand reduction, and we do whatever that cost is to look at that reduction, we would have to see that reduction before we, because we have to substantiate that with SPP, we would have to see that reduction in capacity needs before we can reduce the capacity or generation. So the timing piece is, you have to see the actual work and the reduction, and then you could make the generation changes, and whatever that timeline looks like. But you would compare, and how we have historically done it, as we did the 300 megawatt demand initiative in 2014 was, is there value in reducing that demand or buying capacity? And we identified 300 megawatt of demand reduction was actually at that time a better option than buying capacity. So we'll continually look at those variables at that point in time. But you'd have to see the reduction before you then could reduce your generation capacity.
And I think it's important, again, to reiterate that there's 8 other SD that this competes against. That you have to look at all these other 8 SDs to compete against. And again, I'm the balance person, sorry, that's my big thing. You have to look at the balance.
Well, and so are we, because we do
Yes,
this every
you've got
senior
to.
management
You've got
meeting. We
to.
balance against these SDs, and the stress and the tension around those continually, push us to think and drive different ways to do things.
Well, and I guess just different shading on the words. To me, it's an integrated effort. I mean, you're integrating these others, you're knitting them together in that complicated fashion.
Exactly.
And so this is the document that, not knowing any better information source, that I think I or the community at large would turn to. How do we balance all of these things? How do we get those tensions? Yeah, it's like a whack-a-mole, right? So, this is the document that does that. So back to my comments during our committee meeting, you know, I agree with Craig. We didn't have that early stakeholder process, and so I'm glad that it's there, but.
Great.
So, yay, that's a good change we've learned. I do worry about the demand side management using a tool as expressed in the integrated resource plan, that I've looked at a lot of different IRP guidance documents, and we're the only one that uses it. So I'm struggled with that. I think if we're gonna be best in class, let's at least use the tools that everybody else is using.
And some of them are, and I'll be honest with you, I mean, and Director Yoder, I think, is referencing the RIM test for us, which is really the rate impact measure, which is you don't want to do things that create other negative rate impacts to other customers that aren't participating. We made that selection early on, primarily because of this 20% below the regional average rate impact and rate concern, and that was the rationale at that point in time and why we did it, right? Because you didn't want to drive energy efficiency in certain folks that wanted to do it and increase rates for others that didn't want to participate. So we try to make that rate impact to be certainly greater than 1-to-1. You get greater benefits and demand reduction than you do in energy conservation impacts that impact other customers. So that was the rationale around it.
Sure, and the RIM test, as we're using it, is to compare it against what would happen if nothing else happened, but, well, never mind. I won't go there. But I think there are other things that we invest in that not all customers equally benefit from.
In the interest of time, though, let's keep it
This is going to be
along.
discussed.
Yeah,
This
that's
ST is
exactly where I
going to
was
be
going.
discussed at the
We've
retreat.
only had these for 2 years. You're gonna get a great chance, because that's the next thing, if we
Yeah, that's on
can.
the
Is that it?
Washington retreat.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll move on to governance.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because these are on the workshop coming up. So Director Mines, you wanna walk us through the governance?
Sure. There are 3 action items. The first one is our annual health plan report, and Mark is going to do that.
Thank you. In 1991, Board of Directors authorized us to go to a self-funded administrative services only health plan. The health plan is subject to the Political Subdivision Self-Funding Benefits Act that's set forth in Nebraska statutes. In order to comply with that, we are required to prepare an annual report of the health plan and 2 required reserves. We maintain 2 funded reserves for the health plan. One is for timing delays in claims filing and processing, which is referred to as an incurred but not presented reserve. The second reserve ensures that funds will be available during each ensuing month, which is called the monthly claims and expenses reserve. So if you look at the exhibit that's attached, the good news is that overall our net expenses were down $2.4 million from 2015. That's good news. That's largely driven by a couple of things. The first number that you see there, $33,298,800, represents the cost for medical and dental services and prescription medications for active employees. Included in that figure is the cost for 2 wellness initiatives that we run. We provide health screens for our employees as well as flu shot administration. Those costs were down about $940,000 from 2015. The $21,842,000 amount represents the district's expense to fund the OPEB trust or other post-employment benefits trust. And that's used to pay for current and future claim expenses for eligible retirees, survivors, and long-term disability members enrolled in the OPPD medical plan. Beginning in 2010, OPEB claims were paid from that trust. Medical claims for OPEB members are all included in the line item for other post-employment benefits Plan A. We continue to be overfunded in our OPEB Plan B, which is the VEBA, and it pays the OPPD portion for the premium for those who are hired after 1/1/08 and have retired. And the amounts in the OPEB funds are actuarially calculated.
Hey, Mark, did the OPEB amount go down? Because it seemed to me a while back the active employees and the retirees coverage is starting to get closer together? Is it a little broader than what it was? Did the OPEB cost go down so much?
A little bit, yes, they did go down a little bit. Because we are using more of the health savings account to pay some of those claims, so, yes. The item on fees and reserve adjustments, $3,686,500, was down about $400,000 from 2015 figures, and it represents for the cost for our medical program administrative fees, health management fees for programs we run, such as diabetes management and spine management programs, stop-loss insurance fees, health savings account funding and administrative fees, flexible spending account fees and COBRA fees, as well as the incurred but not presented reserve amount that's required. On the expense side, those amounts that we've paid out get reduced by the amount of contribution to from our employees and from COBRA that are made. That amount is up about $600,000, largely due to premium increases. Prescription rebates, this is an amount that we are reimbursed from the insurance company related to prescription medications that are filled for active employees only. And these do vary every year. And it's up about $73,000. Stop-loss reimbursements were at $337,600. This again will vary depending on how many large claims we have. It is down about $972,000 from 2015, and that is due to the number of large claims that we had. In 2016, we only had 3 that exceeded $450,000 in claims. In 2015, we had 7.
Yeah, so could you verify that? So we're self-funded, but after
So at $450,000 in claims,
we have the
we carry stop-loss insurance. And then the last item is Blue Card access fee refunds. Really what this is refunds that we receive from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Nebraska when individuals have to seek medical care out of state. And they're charged an access fee when those services are rendered and are then reimbursed for those access fees under our contract with Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Overall, good news. Our expenses were down about $2.4 million.
So I'm sorry, I was fuzzy on how the prescription rebates work.
So our employees pay for their medical claims or for their prescriptions that are filled. There are rebates that come from the prescription drug manufacturers. Blue Cross and Blue Shield transfers those to us, so we get those rebates.
And is there some funneling of choice for, I mean, that's just between the patient and the doctor, or they still have free choice of what they're getting there, right?
Blue Cross and Blue Shield does have formularies that we use, and our folks pay more if they go with generic drugs than if they use the formulary.
Any other
I'm
questions?
sorry, they pay more for branded drugs
Right.
than if they use the formulary. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, the second item is corporate officer compensation adjustments. We'll go into closed session on that one. And the final is Scott, an update on our board workshop on July 24th.
Great, thank you. In our commitment, really, as we've been going month to month here, we wanted to make sure that, again, we discussed really what the governance initiative, how it's shaping up, and how really events since the last meeting we've had and discussions we've had have shaped how the workshop itself will show up. As kind of a grounding reminder, as a central reminder, this is part of an overall system that was chartered in 2014. We all know that, and I think actually in light of the conversation today, a big part of this was centered in the dynamic, the shifting environment, what's happening there, and the need to actually make sure that we are really addressing the need to have these kinds of conversations in a changing environment, ultimately making it clear how owner wishes are translating into strategic directives from the board to the organization, how powers are being delegated from the board to the CEO to carry that out, and how we come back and have these monitoring reports and discussions, holding ourselves really accountable for the results that started at the beginning of this process. The board policy workshop, you've seen this a couple of times already, is shaping up in this way. As a reminder, it's 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock p.m. At UNO Engagement Center. There may be a slight change to this. We do, in the spirit of actually getting a second room, because we wanted to make sure we had enough room should there be more public there than anticipated originally. We have to probably be out of there around 4:30. So 4:30 to 5 is when we're looking at the draft end time for the workshop. The workshop goals we've talked about multiple times, so I won't belabor those in the spirit of time and trying to get us back to a 12:20 wrap up on this. But I think the important piece for us to review and discuss and make sure we have an understanding is this agenda. This is new. So from 8 to 8:30, the notion is that there'd be a general welcome, introductions, and agenda overview so that we're all on the same page. And 8:30 to 9 is really centered in what do we want to accomplish, the goals for the day. Also, I think we have all but one response to the survey that went out to senior management and to board members, and we wanted to make sure that we were providing that results back into this conversation. So you'll see the consultant's assessment that came through one-on-one conversations and through surveys, kind of where we are, what we think, how we're performing overall on this governance. Then we want to talk about principles of governance. I think it's going to be important because, again, this goes back to 2015, and as Director Gay pointed out, there's a lot of change in the board. It's going to be important that all board members are on the same page with regards to the principles that set this thing out and have conversation around that, seeking to understand and be clear really around what that was intended to do, what the board wanted to have done. And then 9:45 to 11:30, roughly, it's around refining the governance process. We've heard today several times, we don't have time, we need to move on. How do we carve out the right kind of conversation and time for conversation so that you have the monitoring, which is one thing, was the organization in compliance with the results of the policy that was set forward. There's also this conversation around, is the policy, the content of the policy what you're wanting it to be, and how do we ensure that there's enough time for that kind of thoughtful conversation. We'll go through several options, things that might be considered in terms of making sure that there's the right carve-out time for those kinds of thoughtful discussions, and then land on what that might be. This will likely be a working lunch in light of the fact that we are losing some time at the end of the day here. And then we'll be focusing really on working through some of the strategic policies. What we know from getting feedback from the board, the ones that seem to really warrant the most immediate discussion is SD2, which is competitive rates, SD5, which is customer satisfaction, SD7, which we saw today, environmental stewardship, SD9, which you also saw today, resource planning, and SD13, which is stakeholder. We'll have all of the others ready to go based upon feedback as well, should we crank through these faster. The notion is, I think, to pick up a rhythm and to get a comfortable feeling about how these conversations would unfold and getting clarity through the policies. And then we'll conclude, wrap up with next steps. So at this time, are there any questions, comments, or feedback on the workshop?
Do you go over what the SDs are?
Pardon?
Can you remind us what the SDs are?
Oh, yes, sorry, I can do that. Yes. Again, SD2 is competitive rates. SD5 is customer satisfaction. SD7 is environmental stewardship. SD9 is resource planning. And SD13 is stakeholder and community outreach. Outreach, yeah.
And those were based on the feedback that we all
That's
submitted,
correct.
kind of. And obviously, we just had a robust discussion on 7 and 9, I think it was. So we'll get a lot more chance to talk about that and form on those things. But anyway, it was all by the feedback of what we got, so.
It was really surely based on the feedback that we received from the board in terms of where there were the most questions or where there may be differences of thought and opinion around it.
I don't know that I haven't been part of the process. I certainly am happy with the outcomes that we have from the first time around. How do you feel about this agenda? Or are we giving ourselves enough time for everything we need to do?
I think actually the morning we're giving ourselves the right time, and I think having that foundation, I think it's always good in strategic planning to review the foundation upon which you're building something, just to make sure that the foundation is solid, and I think that the morning time, I think we'll be able to meet that. In the afternoon, it really depends on the level and the depth of conversation and really how quickly we're able to get to some form of consensus, if you will, or appearance of consensus around the desired outcome. So it will either be, if we time them, we'll be able to get through them quickly. If we find that we have a need to extend on one or two, it kind of depends on the conversation that unfolds.
He's very good, Eric Douglas.
He's really
Did a
good.
Great job. You'll be impressed.
Yeah,
And then,
yeah.
one thing, just a legal matter then. So we have this agenda we're publishing. Can we deviate? It's pretty flexible though, isn't it? Let's say we wanted to cover 2 more SDs, because we're not taking any action.
I think that's right.
I'm probably being optimistic.
There's some reasonable flexibility there, yeah.
Okay, that's what I wanted to just say. Let's say like the morning, we go through it fairly quicker than.
Yes.
Then we could spend more time on the SDs, so we can kind of be flexible that way,
Sure.
right?
It
Okay.
may not hurt to, put a parenthetical in there to that effect, but give yourself some flexibility, but I agree with you.
And then remember, we put it out on the website for 30 days of
Yeah,
conversation.
I'm just saying the actual meeting, though, we want that flexibility.
And Steve, on the flip side, if we don't get through the entire agenda, we're just there meeting, no decisions, got it.
Right.
It really,
There's no action.
an informational and goal-setting, conversational meeting as opposed to an action meeting.
Got it.
You're good. What we've done, at least historically, which is one other time, right? So that gives you, well, kind of one other time, we, 2 sets, right? Is that what we would do is that as there are changes being developed on these SDs, Kim is working to come up with whatever that consensus language looks like. And then that language, what Eric will do, will push us through this funnel of, is there consensus, marginal agreement, whatever that looks like. He does a very nice job of that. And out of that will come something that we would then publish and say, here is SD 2 moving forward. We give 30 days comment, perspective, input. We'd share that input perspective with the board in the following month or 2 months later and say, here is the recommended changes and here is the policy for then the board to vote on at that point in time. That's how they have to, that's how we did it last time. I guess I'm open to changes too. So.
What we also found last time is that there were ones that were, there was a comma change or there was really there wasn't anything that required that review, and those kind of were hurried through the approval process, and then others were put out for longer periods of time.
Just 2 quick questions. One is, I'd asked maybe the last month about homework. Are you guys going to be sending something to us to?
You did the homework.
No, but in terms of now that you've got an agenda, any sort of reading prep?
Well, so I'll be sending out the full feedback received by the board to the full board.
Got it.
By policy feedback, feedback.
Got it.
And you're keeping us updated on the stakeholders, you're already sending some stuff in already.
Yeah, and so, and then
And you've
also
been
just
sending
on
us
top
those,
of
which is
that,
good.
you requested the contact information of each person that had sent in feedback. That will be on your sheets today at the board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And we've received 13
total comments.
13 total comments so far.
And then, I obviously haven't seen any of the comments that my colleagues have provided, but one of the things that I was kicking around was a new strategic director around distributed energy resources, and that was before I knew what we were doing on the IEM side. So I don't see, does that fit in? Has that been cut? Can you give me a sense for?
No, I have a similar question, because I had a similar SD that I would have liked, yeah.
I wouldn't say anything has been cut. What I would say is that we've identified these as a focus, and as we talk through in the morning, there would be the conversation around where do we want to focus our time. So, for example, that would be the time to say, can we carve out some time at the end of day for this?
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Good to go. Our last action item is to go into executive session. And are we ready for that? Okay, then, I move the board go into closed session at 12:36. p.m. to discuss commercial terms of the proposed wind power purchase agreement and to receive an update regarding collective bargaining matters and labor contracts and corporate officer performance reviews and compensation matters. With respect to the discussion concerning the wind purchase power agreement, a closed session is necessary because the commercial terms of the proposed contract are considered by the project developer to be proprietary information, which, if released, would give advantage to its business competitors and serve no public purpose. With respect to union negotiations, a closed session is necessary for the protection of the public interest because the discussion of confidential matters related to collective bargaining and labor contracts and matters protected by the attorney-client privilege. With respect to corporate officer performance reviews and compensation matters, a closed session is necessary to prevent needless injury to the reputation of the individuals involved, and no senior manager has requested a public meeting. I would entertain a second.
Second.
Motion second. Kim?
Barrett,
Yes.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Gay.
Yes.
Hurley. McGuire.
Yes.
Mines.
Yes.
Mooney.
Yes.
Yoder.
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, the motion to go into closed session is passed. This closed session will be limited to the discussion concerning the commercial terms of the wind power purchase agreement and to receive an update regarding collective bargaining matters and labor contracts and corporate officer performance reviews and compensation matters. No votes or board action will be taken during the closed session. All right, a motion and a second is required to reconvene into open session.
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second. Roll call.
Barrett,
Yes.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Gay.
Yes.
Hurley.
Yes.
McGuire.
Yes.
Mines.
Yes.
Moody.
Yes.
Yoder. Motion carried.
You want to talk more?
All right, the motion to come out of closed session at 1:45 is carried. The closed session was limited to the discussion concerning the commercial terms of proposed wind power purchase agreement, to receive an update regarding collective bargaining matters and labor contracts, corporate officer performance reviews, and compensation matters. No votes or board action were taken during this closed session. All right, thank you. Thank you, Tim.
Hey, happy birthday.